Hello, everybody.
Yay!
We're here at the Hunt Library at NC State University, and I'm here with Heather.
Hi.
Who's an intern in the Sparrow Swap Lab, and I'm Suzanne Hartley. Some of you might know me from the emails that I send. And we're really excited to talk to you guys tonight. So we're taking a break from being at the Biodiversity Lab to be here at Hunt Library. And we just want to thank everybody who's been part of Sparrow Swap for the last 3 years, those of you who sent in eggs, observations, and all the input that you guys have put into the project, because this project couldn't be possible without people like you. And last year, with everyone's help, we had over 200 clutches of eggs collected, and that equates to about 800 eggs, which is a lot of house sparrow eggs. And so far this year, we've had 30 clutches. So we're excited, and we're just starting to get more boxes in every day. So thank you for everyone who sent in boxes so far this year. And yeah, we are looking forward to getting more eggs from everybody. And we also just love everyone's enthusiasm for the project. Your emails and comments are what keep us going. So thank you everyone for sending those in. And we're very grateful that you guys are here tonight to join us on the Sparrow Swap Lab. And behind the scenes, we have Emma, Dominic, Aubrey, who some of you might know from his Facebook posts, and Maria, a graduate student at NC State, helping us out with some of the tech stuff. So they'll be helping answer some of your questions online, and we'll also answer some of your questions here on screen on live. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to send them in on YouTube, on the chat box on the side or in the comments, and we'll answer them tonight. So send in your comments as you have them, and we'll be happy to answer them. So Heather and I are going to talk a little bit about the project and some of the results of 2017, some of the missing pieces of data we still need to make the project more successful, and also some fun, exciting things that are happening in the lab. So with that, I'll turn it over to Heather to kind of get things started as our host this evening.
So I guess the first question that comes to anyone's mind about this project is, what is Sparrow Swap?
Right. So not everyone might know exactly what Sparrow Swap is. And Sparrow Swap is a citizen science project that involves bluebird groups or bluebirders, people who really love bluebirds from across the country, people who monitor bluebird boxes. And the goal of the project is to try to figure out if we can find better management strategies for house sparrows and invasive pest species to bluebirds. And we do that by trying different management techniques of swapping eggs. And then we have participants send in those eggs, and we use those eggs to try to see if we can monitor environmental pollutants. And the idea behind that is there might be some physical characteristics of the eggs, like the amount of speckling or the color, that could indicate whether there might be more heavy metals in one environment than another.
Cool. So who participates in Sparrow Swap? Like, what kind of people do you get that send in eggs or are involved in the project in any way?
So most of the people that we get tend to be bluebirders, people who are already monitoring boxes, people who kind of have who already know how to identify nests. And we get people from all across the country. Anyone in the United States is able to participate. And we mostly have people participate as swapping, and that's kind of due to the name Sparrow Swap. So one of the things we're trying to do right now is to get more people who remove nest boxes or remove nests, because we need to have comparisons of both swaps and removals. So people can a variety of ways in the project, and we're trying to get even amounts of those two different types of ways, main ways to participate, remove or swap, to be able to accurately compare the data. Yeah.
Are there any larger organizations that also help us out?
Well, yeah, so we have people all across the country. So we have a map to show you guys kind of where across the country we have people participate. And so we've had great support from different groups, like the Master Naturalists of Virginia. There's been a lot of people who are master naturalists that have been great in helping us out. The Birmingham Zoo is part of it as well. They've been sending us eggs, along with, we have a collaborator, Dr. Mamouna Khan at Ripon College. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology has helped us out by sending us eggs as well. And we have some really dedicated people. We have one woman, Mary in Maryland, who sent over like hundreds of eggs last year. It was wonderful. And we have a lot of dedicated people who are helping to make this project possible. And it's not just the eggs that people send in, it's also the observations and ideas that you guys provide has been invaluable to us.
Awesome. So how can you participate in Sparrow Swap?
So most of you guys know this, but you can participate in like 4 main ways: as a collector, where you just send in eggs, you don't have to do any follow-up visits; as a remover, where you remove those nests, and that again is the one that we still need a lot more people to do because we have a lot fewer removals than we do have of swaps. So removals, there's 2 options. You can remove just the nest and eggs, or you can just remove the eggs. And so we need both of those types of removals to be able to compare removals and swaps. Then the third, which I've already alluded to, is swaps. And that's where we have the wooden eggs that you can put into the nest to swap. And then finally, the final way is monitor. And the monitor is maybe the trickiest one, is that's where you can do a removal and swap. But then you also look at the nearby nest boxes. So the goal of that is to figure out what's not only happening in the box that we're removing or swapping, but what's happening in the boxes nearby.
So what happens when the eggs are swapped? Like, do the house sparrows come back? What, like, do the bluebirds stay? Like, can you describe what are the possible outcomes?
Yeah. So there's there's 4 possible outcomes when we swap or remove. The first is that the house sparrow just renests in that box. The second outcome is that a bluebird or a native bird, because it doesn't always have to be a bluebird, nests in that box. And of course, that's like the goal that everybody wants to happen. The third is that the nest box is empty. Either nobody renests if it's a removal, or the box is abandoned in the case of a swap. And then the fourth outcome is, this is particular for swappers, is that the house sparrow is still occupying the nest box. So some of the house sparrows, even at the 4th week, they'll still be sitting on the fake eggs, even though the eggs aren't going to hatch. So those are kind of the 4 possible outcomes of swaps.
So this has been going on since 2016, right?
Yeah.
So do we have any preliminary results or data or?
Yes,
anything?
We do have some preliminary results, and I'd be happy to share those with you. So our preliminary results are that we have for the removals is that we found that 7% of the time a native bird will renest in the nest box, which is our goal that we want. 10% of the time, nothing will nest. The box will stay empty after removal. And then majority of the time, about 83% of the time, house sparrow will renest in that box. And then for the swaps, 1% of the time, it's the bluebird will renest. So you can see that's a bit smaller than with the removal. 36% of the time, then the house sparrow will abandon the nest so that the eggs will be cold. They won't seem like they are been turned, and there will be nothing moved in the nest, so that we consider that abandoned. And so you can see it tends to be that the box remains empty, but it's not that native birds are coming in. And then 63% of the time, the house sparrow either renests or is still attending the box. So this number kind of includes both of those situations, because we consider it as the house sparrow is still attending the box. And that's not necessarily the outcome that we necessarily want. The ideal is that we get a bluebird or a native bird using the box.
Right. So is there a timeline on all of these? Like how long it takes for whatever bird that comes to renest? Like, does it take weeks? How many visits would it take? Do you have data on that as well?
We do have data on that. So it turns out that for removals, it's about 2.7 visits after you remove that the bird renests. And we're both mostly just looking at renesting here when it comes to time, because that's kind of where the difference is for the house sparrow. And 2.7 visits, this is kind of the crude preliminary results. We're going to change those to days eventually. But you can tell that it's a lot quicker when you remove the eggs for the house sparrows to re-nest. So when removals, the house sparrows will nest after 2.7 visits, with swaps after 3.47 visits. So house sparrows tend to re-nest quicker when you remove, and this is when you remove both the nest and eggs. So they're not only just re-nesting, but they're also building a nest and laying eggs in that short amount of time. So it seems like they're like really trying to reproduce. And with the swaps, it kind of takes them a little bit longer. Maybe this is, of course, our guess is that it takes them a little bit longer to realize, that they aren't going to reproduce. And so after 3 to 4 weeks, they'll try again to lay a clutch of eggs. So we seem to be kind of at this point potentially fooling them in the fake eggs.
Yeah. So what happens next if we have all of this data and these results? What happens next? Like, do we need to get more? What is the goal? What is the next part in this project?
Yeah. So to meet our management goal of determining whether swaps or removals which one is a better management strategy, if they're effective, what we really need to know is what's happening in those nearby nest boxes, not just what's happening in that box that we do the swapper removal in, which is what the swapper and the remover options kind of focus towards, but we also need to know what's happening in all the boxes that are nearby. And so in order to do that, we're hoping more people participate as monitors. And that's where you not just monitor the nest box, but if you have more than one box, because not everybody has more than one box, but if you have more than one box, we'd love it if you could send us your observations of what happens in those other nest boxes. And the next thing that we are hoping to figure out is the difference between the two different types of removal. So if we remove, some people like to just remove just the eggs. And some reasoning behind this is if you remove just the eggs, then the bird doesn't really, the bird will just re-nest in there versus trying to find another nest box. Whereas the other option is if you remove both, then the bird might get desperate to lay an egg and go into another nest box and damage or attack like a bluebird. So we want to study the difference between these two removals as well as the difference between removals and swaps. So in order to do this, we need a lot more people who are willing to just remove eggs, because most of the data we have right now is from removing nest and eggs. So if you guys are interested in some of you out there who are doing removals, if you just remove eggs, that will give us a lot more insight onto what happens when we just remove eggs versus removing nest and eggs. So that's one missing piece. And then there's a final missing piece. If I can remember it. Can you remember? Oh, that's kind of missing piece. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah. I think those are
all the missing pieces.
Those are all two missing pieces.
So I guess just going away from this for a second, what do we do with the eggs once they're inside of the lab? Just for a quick snapshot of what happens. Like, yeah. What do I do?
Yeah. So I definitely couldn't do this work of Sparrow Swap couldn't be done without the help of wonderful undergraduate interns at NC State who do a lot of the lab work at NC State. So once you guys send in the eggs, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that takes a lot of time. Sometime I'm going to calculate how long it takes for a single egg to go through unpacking, and then we photograph it, and then we curate it, which is where we cut it open, and then we take thickness measurement, which is where we take the thickness of the eggshell, which is a very, very very small measurement. So we have a very a very precise piece of equipment called a micrometer that we use to do that. And we also, what else do we do? Can take conductance of the egg, which is where we measure how much water loss is through the egg. And so we're trying to use all of that to kind of figure out how potential contaminants can impact the eggs. So a great thing that recently happened back in February is that we got a small grant to test a subset of the eggs for heavy metals. So we're hoping to do that this fall, which we're really excited about. And then in order to figure out if there's any physical characteristics, so we're mostly interested in how speckling might impact, or how metals might impact speckling, or of the egg, so the spots on the eggs, but also how heavy metals can impact the color of the eggs. And to do that, there's a great computer program that we're using called SpotEgg. And what SpotEgg does is SpotEgg uses computer vision to find the spots of the egg. So in this photo, we have the eggs on the top, which are the house sparrow eggs, are photographed very carefully and tediously by Aubrey. And then you run them through the program SpotEgg, and the program finds the edges of all of those spots. So the second photo is a black and white of the spots, but we also get the color of the spots, the color of the background. So we get a lot of information. So we're going to use all that information on the color and the shape and the amount of spots, along with the concentrations of heavy metals that we get from the testing, to try to see if there's any sort of link between heavy metals and eggs. And so with this information, we'll be able to kind of figure out if there's a connection. And from there, we can start to ask more questions about where these eggs are that are more heavy, and start to get into the questions about using the eggs as indicators of contaminants in the environment. So that's what we're hoping to do with the eggs.
And then I think we have a video to showing how we use the micrometer. Do we?
Yes.
Is it?
It's not. I don't.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll send that video out in the comments. We do have a short clip about how we use the micrometer that our intern Hannah took, and we'll put that in the comments below and share that with you guys later. So we're really glad you guys were able to join us tonight, and we'll be answering your questions as there are questions, and this video will be saved. So if you want to come back and look at it in the future, you can, or you can share it with people, with your friends and anyone else you think might be interested. So thanks again, everybody,
I think we might have a question.
Oh, we have a question.
When were sparrows introduced to the U.S.?
They were introduced in 1851. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a bunch of different stories about.
Do you want to bring Aubrey in for the story?
Yeah, Aubrey.
Come here.
Aubrey, you should come in.
Come here. Aubrey is great.
If you guys haven't met Aubrey before,
he's the dad of the biodiversity lab. Aubrey, can you tell the story about how house sparrows were introduced into the U.S.? Please.
So,
come here.
Come here.
So, my understanding about the house sparrows was that the grain farmers in the Northeast thought that it would be to their advantage to have birds that would eat the insects that were bothering their grain. So they brought them here from England, and turns out that they're seed eaters, and so they ended up eating the grain instead of eating the bugs. So that's why we have so many.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yay, Aubrey. How long does lab work, i.e. SpotEgg, heavy metals, and thickness, take?
So each one takes a different amount of time. For SpotEgg, there's been a lot of trial and error that we've been doing. So if the computer does a lot of work, but you have to kind of set it up. So right now we're still in the setup process of running the eggs through. So each photo might take about 2 to 3 minutes of human time, but then also about another like 10, 20 minutes of computer time. So when we have, and that's per clutch. So when we have like we're up to close to 400 photo or clutches now. So that's a lot of time, both human time and computer time. The heavy metals we're going to be doing here at NC State at a lab. So we'll send those samples out. We'll do a little bit of prep work to make sure we have enough weight, enough amount of eggshell, and then we'll be sending those out. So the Sparrow Swap team will have a lot of time in that regards. And then Heather can probably speak to more about how long it takes to do the thickness of each clutch, because she's been working on a lot on that over the last few weeks.
Thickness takes a minute to get used to, but then I can probably do 5 clutches with 5 to 6 eggs per clutch, probably in about 15 minutes now, but it's pretty tedious because the shells can be quite fragile, and you have to pick them up with tweezers and put them in this very also very fragile instrument, the micrometer, that is very expensive. So you don't want to mess it up. And then you take 3 now 6 independent measurements, and then you have to write them down. So just get it, once you get in the flow and you've been doing it for a while, it's not too difficult. It's just tedious. And it's kind of fun in a weird sciencey nerd way.
Yeah, and then some of the other things take a little long, like unpacking. I think it might take us just as long to unpack them as it does for everyone to pack them. And I know it can be a tedious process to pack them in the plastic Easter eggs, but we always love when we get a nice whole egg versus a smashed egg, because some of the smashed eggs can be quite stinky. So some of the eggs that we get arrive a little bit on the rotten side, or
leaky.
So we've learned to kind of deal with the smell. We're trying to use essential oils to keep our noses happy while we deal with some rotten eggs. So one of the questions also is, where do heavy metals come from? And that's going to be a hard one. So heavy metals are a natural thing, like they're an element. So you can't like destroy or create them. So they're found naturally. But what happens is that humans can move those metals from deep into the ground surface to the surface through like coal mining, and we can also shift where the concentrations of those metals are, so they can be in higher concentrations some places versus others due to our human movement. So it is going to be tricky to say like whether it's a human source that a heavy metal is from or it's a natural source, but there are some ways to kind of like indicate whether by different kind of like uses of heavy metals that humans use to kind of start to get an idea of maybe where it's come. So this work that we're going to be doing this fall will be very preliminary, and there'll have to be more research done in the future to start to get to more of those questions of where the heavy metals in the eggs is actually coming from on the land. But first, knowing whether there's heavy metals in the eggs is going to be important. And then also knowing if there's any connection between the color of the eggs and the heavy metals in the eggs. And another question we have is which
heavy metal has the greatest impact on young birds?
That's a good question. I don't know. There's lots of literature out there on heavy metals. I don't know all the answers to the details on heavy metals. I do know that certain metals are more essential. Like there's some that are like essential metals, but in high concentrations, they cause damage, which I can't remember all of this offhand, but I'll be happy to get back. And then there's other heavy metals that are just like not even like a micronutrient. So those can cause damage even at a smaller concentration. So the ones that we're interested in looking at are things like lead, arsenic, maybe cadmium, though I think that's the ones a little bit harder to measure. And we're also going to be looking at the calcium in the egg, because we think that calcium and some metals kind of work together in the body. So, or like they're very similar in the way the body receives them. So it could be that metals are kind of impacting how calcium is used in the eggshell. So that's why we're first looking at heavy metals, because we think there's definitely links between heavy metals, the thickness and calcium in the eggshell, and then also the speckling of the eggs.
So I guess if we wait for just a couple more questions, maybe, what has been your favorite part about working with this project? You personally, since you're like the leader, our fearless leader.
Yeah, my favorite part is probably, I really like the speckling. My favorite part has been working with SpotEgg to try to get SpotEgg working to see. I'm really interested to know what the variation of speckling is. Like, I want to know, are eggs more speckled in Maine than they are in Georgia? Or are they more blue some places than others? So I'm really curious, not just like the heavy metal connection in speckling, but also some potentially environmental things, like do speckling change over seasons? Are they like, eggs tend to be more speckled in beginning of the breeding season versus the end? Are they more blue at the beginning of the breeding seasons versus the end? So those are some of the questions that I personally am most interested in. Those are some questions we have to answer first before we even look at the heavy metals.
So, and then a follow-up to that, I guess, what is the ideal outcome of this project?
Right. So this project is a little interesting in that we have two ideal outcomes of this project.
Two birds with one stone.
Yeah.
Am I right?
So one ideal outcome of the project is the management goal of trying to find a way for people to figure out whether swapping is a better management or removing is a better management in terms of dealing with reducing the impact of house sparrows on native birds. So which has a better outcome for native birds? Are native birds more likely to reuse a nest box if a swap has been done there or a removal has been done there? And then also, what is the impact on nearby nest boxes? So we still need a lot more information for that. And then the second outcome is we hope to be able to use eggs as indicators of contaminants in the environment. So the idea is that we can look at an egg and see that it's more speckled, perhaps, and then know that there might be more of this contaminant, this pollutant, or more of this pollutant. So that's kind of the goal of the eggs being sent in, is to figure out, can we use them to monitor things that are in an environment that we're not monitoring, and to kind of clue us into maybe we should be looking closer here.
How many eggs are in a clutch? It depends.
Yeah, it totally depends. So sometimes we get clutches as low as like 2, and sometimes we get clutches as most as 6. That tends to be how much variation there is between clutch size. But most of the time it's, I'd say, between 3 to 5 eggs.
Yeah.
That we get per clutch. So that can make it a little bit hard stats-wise to figure out how to compare clutches if all the clutch sizes are different. So I'm looking forward to that challenge ahead.
So if a bird lays 1 egg one day and then they leave, but then they come back and lay 2 more eggs like the next day, but they said, would that, I know that they would send them in as 3, but would that be considered 2 separate clutches? Or is that just making something more confusing than it should be?
So house sparrows lay 1 egg per day. So they'll usually lay in the morning, early morning, and they'll lay 1 egg per day every day.
So for anyone interested in sending in eggs, should they wait like a week?
Yeah, so we ask people to wait until the end of the clutch. So so most people are checking like every week, every 7 days.
Cool.
Right. Yeah, so it might be good if you don't know if it's the end of the clutch to wait till the next visit to collect the eggs, provided that it's not longer than 10 days since those eggs could have been laid, because sometimes house sparrows incubation periods only around 10 to 11 days, so they could hatch. But waiting till the end of the clutch is ideal because we want to know how many eggs were in that clutch. So.
It's very cool to go out and check the boxes. I go out with Aubrey and sometimes Emma on Thursdays now, and it is very awesome to open up the nest box and see eggs, or we've seen fresh babies a couple of times, and it's exhilarating. It is so cool. It's a very neat experience. I have a bird in my yard that has eggs near my door, and it keeps getting mad every time I leave my house. I don't want to disrupt the eggs. What do you recommend since I can't move the nest? Don't leave the house. Become what do they call them? Agoraphobe? People who are afraid of leaving. That's agoraphobic, right?
I don't know what that term is. Yeah, so if it's not a house sparrow, if it's a native bird, then you do have to leave the nest, because all native birds are protected under the Migratory Bird Act of 1918. And yeah, that's a hard one. We've gotten some of those questions before, and as much as you can't disturb the nest as you can, obviously you're going to have to get into your house. But yeah, if you have another door, maybe use that door.
I was just about to say, use the back door.
Yeah.
Inconvenience yourself to convenience these birds.
So that is a hard one. But yeah, they are protected under the native birds are protected. So house sparrows, since they're a non-native invasive pest species in the United States, they aren't protected underneath that act, which is why sparrow swap is legal, as long as you're able to accurately identify those eggs as house sparrow eggs.
Do you want to talk about the grant that you got?
I did a little bit. Yeah, I got a small grant through the American.
Get it in like April?
Yeah, it was the end of April.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
A small grant through the American Ornithological Society to to test the heavy metals in the eggs. And Heather was just laughing at
this new question.
A question that we got, which is a really good question.
It is. It just seems so like, well, why do you care?
So one question is, why do we care about bluebirds? So bluebirds at one point were going through a decline in their populations due to habitat change, because they're secondary cavity nesters, which means that they can't make their own nests. They need to find a hole to nest in, because they like to nest in holes. And so...
Do you have a nest box?
Yeah, I do have a nest box.
Yay!
So because of that, people began putting nest boxes like this up.
So to check them, we would go, well, what Aubrey does, he goes in and we make the little field mouse sounds. We go psh, 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 to warn them, and then they fly out. And then if they don't, we go, and then it opens like this. And the box would be right here. Oh, the box is here.
Yeah, so we have a house sparrow nest in this box.
Neat.
So bluebirds were in a decline, and so people began to put up these nest boxes, and now bluebirds are like doing pretty awesome. They're doing great. Their populations are back, but through the concern for bluebirds, bluebird organizations began all across the country, and so now there's a wonderful network of bluebird groups across the country, and it's through most of them and most of you guys who might be watching right now who make this project possible because of their passion for the beautiful eastern bluebird or the mountain bluebird or the western bluebird.
Can you think of a similar situation that people think about how birders think about house sparrows? Like, what is another thing that we could akin that to?
Yeah, so some people call them like flying mice. So I think about it as like, it's a bluebird house with a nest box, and it's a bird house. And so it's like having a mouse in your house. What are you going to do with a mouse in your house? You're probably going to remove it. And so it's the same with house sparrows. It's like we have a pest in your house, and so you're going to take the effort to remove that.
Right. And
pest.
Birders are like pretty passionate, right? Like people who,
yeah.
And bluebirds are like a nice bird that they like, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Another thing about house sparrows is that they're used to humans, so they're everywhere that we are, and that's why you'll see them in Lowe's. Or I was eating dinner the other day, and they were eating, in the Home Depot or garden stores. And I was eating dinner the other day, and they were eating the French fries that someone left on a plate, and I was like snapping photos. Or I see them in the parking garages eating food off. So you see them everywhere because they're used to humans. And that's another reason why we want to use them as indicators for pollutants, because they're everywhere that we are. So they could be being exposed to the same things that we are being exposed to.
Are bluebird and house sparrow nests made up of different materials? Yes.
Yeah, so bluebirds tend to make very neat, woven nests that are usually made out of pine straw if you're in an area with pine trees, or grasses that are woven in kind of a very circular pattern. And
this is literally a house sparrow nest.
Yeah, we have a house sparrow nest here.
I mean, there's some gum wrapper in here. There's just random stuff. Bluebirds wouldn't be this messy, right?
Yeah, so house sparrows use plastic in their nests, tape, all sorts of things in their nests.
So yes. Is this a long-term project? If so, are there plans to monitor bluebird survival in places where nests have been swapped?
So this is a long-term project. We started with a pilot project back in 2015, and now we're moving into, this will be like our third year where we're doing it across the United States. And we don't have any plans of stopping anytime soon. And we need to keep getting more information because we need large sample sizes in order to be asked the kind of questions that we're hoping to ask, because the data can be kind of messy because there's so many things that can happen to a nest. So we are looking for this to be a long-term project. And there's going to be lots of steps to kind of get to those end goals of knowing which management strategy might be the best for native birds, and then also how we can use those eggs for indicators of contaminants in the environment. So it is going to be a while till we be able to fully answer those questions as best as we can. And as for monitor bluebird survival. That's a little trickier because that would require all of you to be able to report back those bluebird survival. And since we don't ban birds, because we can't ask everyone to ban birds, we won't necessarily be able to know that information. So that's unfortunately, there are some limitations because we're relying on there's some questions that we just can't answer. But we do hope to answer those questions of which one's better, swap or removal, and also the contaminant can be used as eggs as indicators of contaminants in the environment.
Yeah. Should we talk about anyone, like how this project came to fruition? Like Dr. Cooper?
Oh yeah, so I'm the project manager, but watching also is Dr. Karen Cooper. She started the project before I joined the project, and she's the lead researcher on the project. And she has dual appointment both at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences, which is where our lab is hosted. You can, if you're ever in North Carolina and Raleigh, you can come visit us. We have a glass lab so you can see what's happening behind the glass. And then also has an appointment at North Carolina State University, which is where I'm a graduate student. And we get most of our undergrad interns as well. I wish we couldn't do any of this work without. They're really hard workers.
So aside from nest boxes, where would you normally find a house sparrow?
So you can find house sparrows in a lot of different places. They tend to be in urban areas and agricultural areas because they like to be where humans and food sources are, or in suburban areas. So they're in a lot of different places, but you can find them if you're looking for nests, not in nest boxes. You can find them off in any sort of crevice. So I've seen them in parking garages. Sometimes they nest in the lights of street lights and street lights and street signs. We have 2 by the museum that are just yelling at each other from across from each street light. So you can find them in all sorts of places. Kind of anywhere where we are, they tend to be. In more like natural areas and like large forests, they tend not to be. So there's some places in the United States that we don't seem to have a problem with house sparrows. We've been trying to get kind of house sparrows from across the US, but I know I've contacted some people in Florida who say that they just don't have problems with house sparrows. So there are some places that don't seem to be, but they're in most of the places that we are.
What is citizen science?
Good question. Citizen science is a way to do science that engages more than just scientists, but also the general public in all sorts of ways, from sending in observations and data to being more involved in the creation of questions, depending on the project. So our lab, Dr. Karen Cooper's lab is all about citizen science. So we do a lot of different citizen science projects.
She has a great TED-Talk if you want to Google it about citizen science.
It's also on our website, sparrowswap.org. You can see it there in one of our earlier blog posts, I think, from last year.
How many nests per season can bluebirds versus house sparrows have?
This is a good question that I honestly don't know the answer to offhand, so I will have to get back to you. But both can re-nest more than once per season. So some birds tend to just re-nest or lay 1 nest per season, but both are more than 1 nest per season. So it probably varies due to the resources that bird has, and if it was a successful nest versus a non-successful nest, whether they have enough resources to re-nest, and also probably depends on geography. So I don't know that answer offhand, but I can look more into it and get back to you about that one. So I think if there's no more questions, and if there are any more questions that we didn't answer, we'll be sure to answer them online tonight. And this video, like we said before, this video will be saved so you can refer back to it as you want. And we want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. And yeah, continue to ask us questions. We love to hear from people. I'm just always dying to know what people are wondering. So don't hesitate to contact us. And we're really glad that you guys were able to join us tonight.
Should we answer this one more?
Okay, we can answer this more question.
Just one more. Are sparrows easily fooled by the fake eggs? Do they realize they are wood? That's a good one.
Yeah, that is a good one. So there's kind of, so some people say that, so some people have this experience where even marbles have fooled house sparrows or stones. There's been a paper that showed that house sparrows weren't really able to distinguish their egg from another egg across the board. There's some more like anecdotal incidences of house sparrows kicking out an egg and that might realize isn't their own, but in the general, the house sparrows aren't able to identify their eggs. And that's kind of the basis of our project, is the idea that house sparrows aren't really able to identify their eggs, not like some birds. So they can't tell the difference between a wooden egg and a real egg. So that's why we think that swapping could be a good management strategy. And yeah, so that will be our last question for the evening. And we're really glad that all of you could join us. And we hope to do one of these in the future. So if you have any ideas of what you would like to see us talk a video on, if you want to take a tour of the lab, we'd love to hear what you would like to see more of and what you'd like to learn more about the project. So feel free to leave comments of what you would like to see us do a video or a Q&A of next, and we'll be happy to do it in the near future. So thanks everyone for coming out tonight, and we hope to hear from you. Bye.